I have trouble going to sleep at night. I won't whine and complain about having false insomnia. I just can't go to sleep at night, but I've never gone to a doctor about it. Instead, I just get in my truck and drive around for about an hour at night to relax and unwind. I live in Lubbock, Texas. For those of you who know the area, you know that once you leave Lubbock, it's several miles in either direction before you reach another town. The highways leading out of Lubbock go through miles of flat nothingness before reaching another town. Driving on Highway 84. It's a long way from Lubbock to Littlefield, the nearest large town to the city. It's a nice drive to make when you're alone. Very calm, quiet, and dark. On this particular night, it was a typical cold late January night. I had recently started up classes at Texas Tech again and was feeling a bit stressed. So I do what I always do around midnight when I can't sleep. I grab my keys, throw on a coat, grab a small cup of warm coffee, and drive. I took Highway 84 that night, as I hadn't driven the road since I had come back from winter break. As I passed Shallowater that began the long stretch of open road between Shallowater and Anton, I was no more than a fourth of the way to Anton when I heard a tap on my passenger window. I figured it was a rock and ignored it. But then I heard it again, and again, and again. 3 distinct taps on my passenger window like someone was trying to get my attention. I turned my head to look out the window. To this day, I wish I hadn't. Staring back at me with dark black irises was a man, his face pale, almost grey, sitting in the dead center of the window, smiling. That smile was the most evil thing I have ever seen. He bore all of his teeth in a wide smile. They were pearly white, and not one of them was out of place. His hair was jet black and short, almost like something out of the 1950s. But that smile, the never-ending grin he bore, has been etched into my mind permanently. I jumped and jerked my truck slightly into the other lane before recovering and straightening out again. I had taken my eye off the window, hoping what I had seen was just a hallucination of some kind. I looked back, and he was still there, just smiling at me like he had been waiting to see me. He raised his hand and started waving at me. I turned my head forward and stared straight ahead. I jerked my truck into the left lane and then swung it back into the right, but I didn't look to see if he was gone. I was too afraid to look. I kept telling myself to keep my eyes on the road and find a place to turn around. Then I see something out of the corner of my eye. I glance over, and it's a man, running on all fours, naked. My jaw dropped. I looked at my speedometer. 75. I look back. It's him, smiling at me again. I floored it and race away from the guy. I heard him jump into the back of my truck. I check my rearview mirror, and there he is, staring back at me through the mirror, still smiling. I'm almost in tears. I just want him to go away. I find a turnaround, slam on the brakes, and check my rear view. He never moved. It was like he had no momentum at all. I didn't even look to make the turn. I just did it and hit the gas as soon as I was on the road again. I can't even be bothered to do the speed limit. As far as I'm concerned, this was an emergency. I returned to Lubbock without the thing in my truck. I know this because as I turned onto my street, he was standing on my front porch, waving to me. Being an Uber driver in Las Vegas, I've had my fair share of late-night pickups. From drunk tourists to locals who've lost track of time at the casino, it's always an interesting ride. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on a chilly night in November. I was cruising around the outskirts of the city when I got a ping. The pickup location was from a little-known casino far off the strip. I accepted the ride and drove to the destination. A tall man, swathed in a long trench coat, his face hidden under a hat, was waiting for me. "Evening," I greeted him as he got into the car. He merely grunted in response, settling himself in the back seat. The trip would take about 45 minutes, given the late-night traffic or lack thereof. As we drove, I tried to engage him in a light conversation, a habit I've developed to put my passengers at ease. But the man was monosyllabic, answering in grunts or nods. About 15 minutes into the drive, my rider got a phone call. "Yes, I understand. I'll take care of it," he muttered into the phone, his voice low and gruff. The way he said those words sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. The ride was mostly silent after that. My eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, meeting his hidden gaze every time. The man's phone rang again. He answered it swiftly, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear everything he said, but one phrase stuck out. "The driver doesn't know anything." A knot formed in my stomach. Was he talking about me? But why? Questions swirled around my mind. As if the universe had a sick sense of humor, the car chose that moment to sputter and die right in the middle of a deserted stretch. Panic surged through me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Sorry, sir," I stuttered, trying to hide my growing fear. "Let me see what the problem is." But as I moved to open the car door, the man's cold hand clamped around my wrist, stopping me in my tracks. "No need," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "We will wait." And so we sat there, in the middle of nowhere, waiting in silence, making the night even more terrifying. The minutes dragged on in tense silence. The only sound was the ticking of the dashboard clock. Just when the tension was becoming unbearable, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. As they drew closer, I could make out a black SUV. It pulled up behind us, its high beams momentarily blinding me. Before I could process what was happening, the man in the back seat broke his silence. "You should stay in the car." There was an urgency in his voice, a warning. He got out, his tall silhouette barely visible in the dim light. He walked over to the SUV, leaving me alone, my mind racing with questions and fear. The man was talking to someone from the SUV, their conversation too hushed for me to hear. Suddenly, he turned and pointed towards my car, towards me. The panic returned, more intense than before. Was I in danger? Should I run? Before I could make a decision, the man returned. He got back into the car without a word. Suddenly, my car roared back to life. It startled me. I hadn't even touched the ignition. "Drive!" the man commanded. His voice was cold, authoritative. Despite my confusion and fear, I obeyed, eager to get away from the ominous SUV and its unknown occupants. The rest of the ride was shrouded in silence. Only my mind kept playing the night's events, each replay adding to the sense of surreal horror. The man, the phone call, the mysterious SUV, it all felt like a twisted nightmare. We finally arrived at the destination, an isolated house at the end of a long driveway. The man got out, his imposing figure disappearing into the darkness. Just when I thought the night's ordeal was over, my phone vibrated. An incoming text message, the sender unknown. The message, "Get out of there, now." A cold shiver ran down my spine as I read the text. The words, "Get out of there, now," seemed to echo ominously in the quiet car. My eyes darted to the house. It was an unremarkable structure, save for the utter isolation. Its windows were dark, its surroundings eerily silent. The man was nowhere to be seen. With a jolt, I realized I was still parked at the end of the driveway. I needed to leave. Fast. The mystery text, the man, the ominous house, everything screamed danger. Just as I was about to hit the gas, the front door of the house swung open. The man stood there, silhouetted against the dim light from inside the house. But instead of approaching the car, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door ajar. Something about the scene felt like a final warning, like an invitation into a trap. Terror gripped me. My foot hit the accelerator, tires screeching as the car sped away from the house. My breathing was ragged, hands tight on the wheel. The city lights in the distance seemed miles away. Just as I was starting to think I'd escaped, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Don't stop driving. The rest of the night was a blur. I drove aimlessly, my mind consumed by fear and confusion. The first light of dawn found me parked in a 24-hour diner's lot, my body numb with exhaustion. I reported the incident to the police, but without concrete evidence or clear motive, there was little they could do. The unknown number that had sent me the warnings was untraceable. The man, the house, the cryptic texts, they all remain a mystery. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed at the house that night. My story remains a chilling reminder, a nightmarish memory of the time I stepped into the darker, unseen world that exists beneath the city's neon-lit facade. I'm 18 years old. I graduated not long ago. A week or two before I graduated, I went to one of my friend's graduation party. I left the party at about 10 that night. I live about 30 miles outside of town. Roughly 20 miles of that is on dirt roads. I love driving at night, especially when I don't have to go anywhere specific. It's therapeutic to me, at least it used to be. I had just turned on one of those roads. I was in a good mood. The window was down and the radio was playing softly. It was relaxing. I wasn't going fast, only about 45 miles, just cruising. I used to drive a 2002 Jeep Wrangler. Up ahead I saw something moving. Could have been a coyote or antelope. Suddenly it crossed the road in front of me. I swerved to miss it. I swerved too hard and rolled into a ditch. I smashed my forehead into the windshield and blacked out. I woke up with a jolt. I was upside down. I was bleeding pretty badly from a gash in my forehead. I couldn't remember what happened. It took me a moment to realize that I had been woken up by something. Something was lurking around the Jeep, sniffing and snuffling like a large dog. A putrid, decaying smell invaded my nostrils. It was strong enough to make me gag. In a flash, I remembered. I remembered the pale, naked, thin figure walking on the road in front of me. Its horridly long and dangling arms, its tall, thin head, and those small, beady eyes that glowed in my headlights. It wasn't human. I kept a K-bar knife that I bought with birthday money in the Jeep for emergency situations. The middle console had spilled open in the wreck, so I searched and found the knife on the roof as the Jeep was upside down. I grabbed it and cut my seatbelt. I fell to the ground with a thud. There was an excruciating pain in my left arm. I couldn't move it. I bit through the pain and sat up. I could hear the snuffling outside grow quicker and more frantic. It must have heard me. Suddenly I could see 2 feet outside the driver's side window. They were, like the rest of the creature, disproportionately long and thin, ending in 4 toes. There was dried blood crusted on them. There was a scratching on the door. It was trying to get in. Frantically, I plunged my hand out the open window and stabbed the creature in the foot. It let out a piercing shriek and ran off into the night. I crawled out the window. I tried to stand up too quickly and passed out. I woke up in the hospital the next day. My dad had gotten worried about me about 20 minutes after I should have been home and went looking for me. He found me passed out next to my overturned Jeep. I had lost a lot of blood and suffered some head trauma. Out of fear of being called crazy or not being taken seriously, I told everyone I fell asleep at the wheel. It still didn't explain the scratches on the driver's side door of the Jeep. Scratches that looked like they had been made by a man. For the next few months, there would be strange talk in town. Ranchers in the area would report dead cattle with their entrails strewn about everywhere. People in cafes would tell stories about seeing strange lights, hearing strange noises, and spotting strange eyes in the night. In time, it seemed everyone had seen the elusive, thin man of Tatum, New Mexico. But all talk and reports of such a creature stopped after a few months. The creature and the strange lights disappeared. I don't think I'll ever go driving at night again.